Hello and welcome to Unacademy. I welcome you all to this session, a very interesting one. The task in hand is to understand how the British established their control and rule in India itself. And therefore, we'll be covering very interesting aspects of the wars which the British fought. We'll be concentrating on Carnatic, thereafter Bengal. Then we'll discuss the Marathas, the Mysorean sector, and last but not the least is the Sikhs. Together, these 5 sectors are important because any question in UPSC will revolve around these. And in the next 3.5 hours, we'll try to cover each and every aspect of what is relevant for the examination. Because if you go through any form of literature, you will find a lot of details which may be unnecessary or may be distracting in that regard. So what we'll do is, we'll try to concentrate on the main story. I'll keep on telling you what to remember. I'll give you a trick on how to remember all the wars in the end. And I will also give you a mnemonic and trick for all the treaties. So you have to hang around with me till 10:30 and thereafter I will give you the trick. Now, before we begin, a very important announcement, which is that the lowest price offered by Unacademy for a 15-month course, which is 22,999, is running as of right now. And you have to use the code IS English so as to be attributed to our team, because you will get one-to-one mentorship sessions. It is important that you use the code IS English. I cannot emphasize enough how important this code itself is, because if you're attributed to the wrong team, you will not get the right mentorship. English team, Unacademy IS, you have to use the code IS English and use this opportunity to become a part of our family in that regard. Now, if you need any guidance, if you're looking for any form of guidance for history, for UPSC, be it history optional or generally, you have to scan this QR code and you will be taken to a Telegram channel, which you are going to then subscribe. Now, all details related to this code and everything else is given in the description box. And I hope you will like, share and subscribe to the session. It's going to be an interesting journey and we will systematically develop this whole concept itself. Previously, I have covered social reform movement or even World War I. After this, we'll try to cover World War II. But this was the need of the hour with regards to the examination. Now, what module we're actually covering today is called Expansion of British Power or British Raj in India. Now, before this, it is presumed that you would know how the Mughals declined with regards to the Jagirdari crisis, with regards to agrarian revolt, creating a power vacuum itself. You would also know how the Europeans came through into the Indian subcontinent, from the Portuguese to the Dutch to then the English. Thereafter, we will also try to see that how the English were able to expand vis-a-vis the Danes and the French. The French became the most important rival in that regard. We will also try to now understand, once the British is able to get its initial success, which is very, very important. The initial success is because of concessions, be it the initial Jahangir Farmans of 1613 or 15, or be it what we today call as the Golden Farman itself. So from 1613 to 1615 to 1632, these are 3 very important concessions which are given to the British. Now, these are 2 Jahangir Farmans allows Surat in that regard as becoming a factory site for the English. 1615 allows for further expansion of the British on the west and the east coast. 1632 gives them that very important Golden Farman, 500 pagodas. You can trade in the Golconda sector for duty free in that regard, a template which the British are going to use very well in that regard. 1639 is something I'm again trying to give you the backstory, which is 1639 they will get the Chandragiri Farman or the Chandragiri concession, in which they will establish Madras, move away from Mauchlypatnam in that regard. And by 1661 and 1668 they were able to establish themselves in Bombay. In between, in 1651 they will be given what is called as the Shasuja Farman, very important, will allow them to then expand into the Calcutta sector. And thereafter, by 1698, with a small skirmish and a issue with Aurangzeb, they will be restored most of the Shasuja Farman understanding, which is for 3,000 rupees they can trade in Bengal for duty-free understanding. Thereafter comes the most important Farman and our entry point into this topic, which is called the 1717 Farrukhsiyar Farman. So this 1717 Farrukhsiyar Farman basically affirmed all other Farmans in that regard. Surat for 10,000, Bengal for 3,000. Golden Farman was also in a way considered, 500 pagodas. They could now also be in Madras in that whole sector on basic rent itself. This is called the early intervention of the British, early expansion of the British based on the understanding of concessions. Here what we call is, it is in the imperialistic mode, in which it is trying to take out as many concessions as possible based on the idea that they used to act like helpless traders. This is where the British, because they were a private enterprise, the British East India Company, they used this opportunity quite well to argue that you give us more trade, we will bring in more revenue for you. But in every sector, they misuse their farmans, be it the Golden Farman, be it the Bengal Farman, and be it the Farrukhsiyar Farman. We will come to this, but what I want to establish in front of you right now is that the British had established themselves, even when the French came in 1664, had established themselves a very important, you can say, whole nodes of territories in and around the west and the east. What I mean by that is, for example, in the western sector, they had Bombay as a headquarter, independent. On the other hand, on the eastern sector, they had the Madras sector as an independent headquarter. They were not sharing that area either with the Dutch or the French in that regard. French were able to establish themselves by 1674 in Pondicherry, very close to the British itself, and therein they had Surat, they had Bengal presence, they have the whole Bay of Bengal and the Arabian Sea sector in a way, in a good, you can say, control, and they were able to undercut the Portuguese very systematically because of the fact that Portuguese had a flawed colonial model which was based on the concept of controlling the seas rather than territory. This is where the British kept on trying to find a way to expand inwards into the Indian subcontinent rather controlling the Bay of Bengal or the Arabian Sea. So this is considered to be the backstory, which I presume you would know, but is a very messy part out of any form of literature you will read for UPSC. So if you can remember these basic dates, you will remember it more or less. If you can, you will get what UPSC is doing is now asking questions from this area, which is the Dutch, the French, and the Danes, even the Portuguese are now being asked. We have seen 2 to 3 questions previously on this area, which is the initial advent of European parts. UPSC did not used to touch this area, but has now developed a certain liking for it in that regard. So in that context, we now have the basic idea that when I turn my attention towards the Carnatic sector, the British are already sitting at Madras, what is today called as Chennai, and therefore it's a very, very important headquarters for all trade towards the Malaccan sector and in the Bay of Bengal sector. Now, the first, you can say, battle which the British had to fight was not with an internal power, but actually with a European power. The French were quite late to come to the Indian subcontinent. Quite late that way, 1664, they are going to realize that importance of colonialism. The French busy in their own understanding, pure governmental body itself. And when by the time the French will establish themselves properly at Pondicherry, the British were already dotting all of the Indian sector in that regard. But the French, when they came into the Indian sector, they came with a certain understanding and a very, very important task in hand, which is what the Dutch had done to the Portuguese, the French wanted to do it to the English, which is take away their trade and in a way establish their hegemonic control, or at least forceful control over the sea, or what we call as the volume of trade going towards the Malaccan sector and towards the Yellow Sea in that regard. Now, from the outset itself, one thing should be very clear, that the French were on the back foot because East India Company already quite well established. French are not known to be very good when it comes to implementation of, you can say, constitutions or even, you can say, basic policies in that regard. And this is something which the French bring with them to India, but they had a very important governor. His name is Dupleix. Dupleix is a very smart personality. He understands trade quite well, is a good administrator also. And from Pondicherry, he was controlling this trade quite well. Now, when we talk about Anglo-French rivalry, it is not that this was the first time that the Anglo-French rivalry was taking its, you can say, form in that regard. Anglo-French rivalry goes back to the 16th and 17th century itself. And in that sense, we have the 100 Years' War, the 30 Years' War, multiple wars which were fought by the English and the French. This is where the proximity of the English and the French is something which is problematic for the Bay of Bengal sector generally. Madras, Chennai is here. You have Fort St. David, which is again an English sector, and you have Pondicherry here. Now, basically, only close to 150 kilometers in between them, lesser than that itself. And with Pondicherry and Madras so close in proximity, it was inevitable that the rivalry of the French and the English would manifest itself in India. And herein lies a very important map, because you have to understand what is the political configuration of the peninsular sector, which is you have a political unit here which is called the Carnatic. Carnatic basically was part of the Hyderabad sector, but when Hyderabad got what we call as Mughal independence, if you want to call it, as a successor state, Carnatic also came out. It was Sadadullah Khan who is going to basically, who was the deputy Subedar, he's going to basically take away power and establish himself. And it was a person called Dost Ali who was ruling this sector properly, the Carnatic sector. This is the Carnatic sector. Thereafter, you have the Nizam's territory, which is quite big that way. Northern Sirkars goes up till the Orissa sector. Nizam controlled a very big chunk in that sense. And Nizam-ul-Mulk Asaf is the person, or Chinkilich Khan, his old name, is the person who's controlling this sector in that regard. Further, we have Mysore under Hyder Ali. He will come into this picture very soon. And you have Travancore as a certain... The Travancore technically was under the hegemony of, or you can say control of, the Mysorean sector, but was trying to always become independent in that regard. But Travancore is an independent sector in that regard. Here we have the most important, the Marathas. Under Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, they had been able to establish themselves as a very important power in this sector. And by the time we come to the Marathas, you will see there's a little bit of internal turmoil and a civil war which is happening within the Marathas. So you can see there's a certain configuration in which all of these things are going to happen. And we will try to, you can say, unpack it in small, you can say, details. It has to be done systematically. If not, it will become extremely overwhelming. You have to understand this point very clearly, that overwhelming part is that if I have too much detail in front of me, you will then switch off, which I don't want to do. Now, let's concentrate on the Carnatic sector. Carnatic sector has both the English and the French. And I've already told you that when we talk about the English and the French, they already have a proper rivalry in this sector, which is that they have an old story of conflict. Their proximity near Madras and Pondicherry makes it quite inevitable. And because the English can't challenge the Marathas, cannot expand in the under Alivardi Khan in the Bengal sector itself, it is very clear that it was the Carnatic sector where it was going to manifest itself as a conflict. This is a very important point you have to understand. The conflict was going to manifest itself in Carnatic because of the proximity. Why am I saying this? Because there can be a mains question in why chronologically it was the Carnatic sector where they fought first. Why not in Bengal? Why not in any other sector? It is here that they fought together because of the proximity together. Now, let me now first discuss with you, and this is the first part of our discussion, what are called as the Carnatic Wars. Carnatic Wars are 3 wars. We have 3 Carnatic, 4 Mysore, 3 Maratha, 2 Sikh, 2 Bengal. This is basically the number. As you can see, Mysore 4. So that is one of the biggest which we will cover. Now, in the Carnatic War, we start our discussion with regards to the first Carnatic War. Time period is 1746 and 48. Though some places you will also see the date 1740 to 48, but the war happens between 46 to 48. You will find this also. 1740, 48. Doesn't really matter, it is the first war. As it is, when I will teach you the trick, you will realize that there is actually no need to learn the dates itself. I will show that to you, don't worry. Now, when we talk about the first Carnatic War, the reasons for the First Carnatic War do not lie in India. They rather lie in Europe itself. And this is where, though the English and the French were very close by on the same coast itself, till 1740, they are not going to fight. Close to 60, 70 years, they will not fight. And this is where something called the Austrian War of Succession comes into picture. So this is a very standard question which is asked in the examination and also has previously come as a mains question, which is that how is the First and the Third Carnatic War actually related to one another? And this is where First Carnatic and Third Carnatic happen because of reasons in Europe, and Second Carnatic happens because of reasons in India itself. And this is a very interesting way in which you can remember it also. First and Third Europe, second because of internal civil war. Now I need to qualify what is this Austrian War of Succession. Now, when we talk about the Austrian War of Succession, there are two sides. And the bone of contention is, after the death of Charles VI in Austria, there was a war of succession. And the war of succession was based on the fact that, can the daughter of Charles VI take the throne being a woman? Her name is Maria Theresa. Maria Theresa, who's the daughter of Charles VI, says that my father had introduced certain changes in the early 18th century, which allows for women to be rulers. However, from the Bavarian sector, one of the cousins of Maria Theresa is named Frederick. Frederick is going to challenge the succession of Maria Theresa. This is basically an infighting within the Austrian sector itself, because Bavaria is considered to be a subset of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, or what is called as Austrian Habsburgian Empire. And now it is Frederick versus Maria Theresa. However, conflicts in Europe do not remain within Europe itself, and not even in that country itself. And this is where two very important factions develop with two very important powers. Great Britain or England has always recognized women as rulers. They have had multiple queens, and therefore they now started to support Maria Theresa. On the other hand, the French, who only allowed the Bourbons, the Louis to come to power, they said Bavaria is right, and therefore Maria Theresa cannot come to power, Frederick will come to power. And this is where two factions will develop in Europe itself, which is called the Austrian War of Succession, in which France, Prussia, Spain, Bavaria, Sicily, Naples, Genoa and Sweden will say Frederick is going to become the next ruler. Britain, Habsburg, Hanover, Dutch, Saxony, Sardinia and Russia will say Maria Theresa is going to become the next ruler. This is called the Austrian War of Succession, 1740-48. So you can see for the first 6 years nothing happens, but for 6 years our two important protagonists are on the opposite sides. This is what you have to remember. You don't have to learn the basic contours of the French and the British and this list itself, but you should know our two important actors are on the opposite sides. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the story first, then I'm going to add the details that I do in class, and then we will conclude the whole section. Because there are multiple wars, I want to first give you a story which you can remember, then we'll add the details itself, and then we are going to then basically revise and move forward in that regard. Now, let's focus on the Carnatic sector. Now, this is basically our Carnatic sector. You have Madras approximately here, and we have Pondicherry. Rather, we can also write here the English and the French. Now, till 1746, nothing happens. And the year 1746 comes into context. War of succession is already happening in Europe, but it will now spill over into the Indian sector, the Indian subcontinent. Now, Duplex is going to send a very interesting message to the English. So from Pondicherry, there will go a message to the English that though our countries are fighting in England and in France and in Europe itself, it makes no sense whatsoever for us to fight in the Indian subcontinent. A very, very reasonable, you can say, understanding that why do we need to fight here? Duplex said, we don't need to fight here. So he said, let's keep neutrality of the Bay of Bengal sector, and I am not going to do anything. I would expect the same from you. However, this is where nationalism comes through. There were certain ships of the French which were plying in this sector. And now comes the first act. The first act is by the English. The English capture power and they basically seize these ships of the French. So the first aggressor is the English. English capture these ships or seize these ships. Now Duplessis says, I told you not to show aggression. Not to show aggression in this sector, but you have now seized my ships in the form of this Austrian War of Secession in the concept of nationalism. Now I am not going to back down. And this is where from Pondicherry and from the Mauritius sector, under La Bourdonnais, there will be a force which will come through to Pondicherry and they will capture Madras. Fort St. George has been captured, which is La Bourdonnais and the under Duplex, they have captured Madras because they said, we did not want any aggression. Now that you are showing aggression, this is what we are going to do. So, Madras has been captured by the French, very important port of the British. Now, a very standard response of the English would have been that they would retaliate. They would then try to capture Pondicherry, or they would then try to either defeat them on the seas. But the English are a private company, and the English did not see any form of logic to fight the English, and this is where they acted like a child. What the English did was, they sent a message to Arcot. Arcot is the capital of Carnatic, and one of the most important deputies of Dostali, Anwaruddin, is now going to receive a message from the English that, O Anwaruddin, in your reign, the French have captured our Fort St. George. What type of ruler are you? We thought that you can give us protection. Don't forget, do not forget this, that the English were the first aggressors. But this is where they're doing politics and basically saying that the French actually hit us. We didn't. And rather than fighting themselves, they are going to make Anwaruddin fight for them. And this is where Anwaruddin is going to say, no, this cannot happen. As the deputy of Dostali, I will not let this happen in my sector. And therefore, what is going to happen is, he will now take a small army and move towards Pondicherry. The French are going to get to know that Anwaruddin is responding on the behalf of the English itself. And therein, under Captain Paradise, an army will move from Pondicherry towards the Arcot sector, and they will meet on the banks of the river Adyar, and there will be what is called as the Battle of St. Thom. Battle of St. Thomas, sometimes also called as St. Thom. Now, at the Battle of St. Thomas, a very small but efficient French army is going to defeat the very, very old and outdated army of Anwaruddin, and the French will defeat Anwaruddin and say, we will hold on to the Madras sector. We are not going to give it up. So, in a way, the first Carnatic War was actually not a war between the British and the French. It was instigated by the English, but the the Carnatic sector fought on the behalf of the English, and the French defeated the Carnatic sector, or Carnatic itself, the Carnatic state, or what we today call as the Anwaruddin army. So now British have lost control over Madras, and the first Carnatic War has in a way shown that Dupleix is a good ruler, is a good general, and the French have showed their hand. But the question is, how will the English get back the Madras sector? And this is where there's a very interesting concept. In India, the French won. However, in the Austrian War of Succession, the French side is going to lose. Meaning, Maria Theresa faction is going to win. And because of that, there will be what is called as the Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle. And in the Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle, because the British had won this sector, they are going to say, French, you return us Madras, and English, we are ready to give you certain areas in North America. A very bad deal for the French in that regard, because they get North American sector, but they have to lose out to Madras. But the British had won the Austrian War of Succession, and the Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle was signed by the victors. Therefore, the first Carnatic War is a very interesting case. The French showed their supremacy, but in the end, everybody came back to their own space, and through the Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle, now we are back to status quo. This is called the first Carnatic War. Starts with British aggression, ends with the Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle, in which everybody comes back to their own space itself. Now, just to add more detail into it, Mauritius, La Bourdonnaise is going to come. He is going to invade Fort St. George and capture it. Thereafter, Anwaruddin is going to be sent on the behalf of Dost Ali, and at the Battle of St. Thomas, the Nawab is going to lose to the French, and the French are then going to say that we will not give up Madras. However, it is the Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle which is going to basically reverse the whole concept itself. The signatories were Britain and France, but British was the victor in Europe. Because Europe is the main theater, they will then in a way be able to assert their will. Madras will be handed back to the English, and the French will get certain North American territories. What you have to learn here is basically Anwaruddin, his name is equally important, La Bourdonnaise, Dupleix, Aix-la-Chapelle. Are we clear about the first Carnatic War? I want your assertion here. Are we all on the same page with regards to the first Carnatic War? Very straightforward. Austrian War Succession. This is not the complicated war. The complicated war is coming, which is the second Carnatic War. We're on the same page? Yes, sir? Okay. Dharni says yes, sir. Ishwar says yes, sir. Okay. Now, the second Carnatic War, that way is quite interesting, because the reason does not lie in the what we call as European sector, but in the Indian sector. La Bourdonnaise, track. La Bourdonnaise. Don't have to learn his name per se, should know. Now, this is where we see a very interesting tendency develop in India, which is infighting. And the English and the French will very quickly realize that this disunity can be used to their advantage. Now, what is the context? In Hyderabad, let me rather take a map slide. One sec. Yes. This is second Carnatic War context. So we have the Hyderabad sector and we have the Carnatic sector. In the Hyderabad sector, what happens is Nizam-ul-Mulk Asaf Jah dies. Nizam-ul-Mulk Asaf Jah dies, and after the Nizam, there are two people who are actually fighting for the throne. Two people fighting for the throne. One is called Nasir Jang and the other one is called Muzaffar Jang. Now understand one thing, please do not learn the relations, because then it is going to become like a CSAT question. The father of the son of the mother of the... Learn their names, that is good enough. UPSC will never ask you who is the son of Nizamul Mulk Asaf Jah. So please, one of the reasons why you complicate this sector is you try to learn the connections between them. For me, they are just, and for you, they should just be names. UPSC will never ask that type of question. It is not a PCS level examination. Now, Nasir Jang and Muzaffar Jang are now fighting against one another for who is going to become the next Nizam. And in the Carnatic sector, what happens is, Dost Ali dies and an obvious successor, for example, in the form of Anwaruddin, is going to be challenged by a person called Chand Sahib. Chand Sahib is going to say that Anwaruddin is not going to be the next ruler, I will be. And this is where the English and the French realize something. What they realize is, if we are able to install a ruler who is pro to us, that in turn will allow us to trade in this section with a lot, or in this section with a lot of concessions. So it's about installing a ruler who is pro to you. And this is where you can say for the first time, but not the last time, now the British and the French will choose sides. Nasir Jang and obviously Anwaruddin will get the support of the English, something which they are now basically emulating what they've done, for example, in Maria Theresa versus Frederick. They're doing it in India. But this is totally new to the Indian subcontinent as of right now, which is this 1700 and what we call as 49-54 period, in between the Austrian War session and the 7 Years' War. And Muzaffar Jang and Chand Sahib will get the support of the French. So basically now there are two factions which have developed, which is Nasir Jang plus the Anwaruddins and English versus Muzaffar Jang, Chand Sahib and the French. And this is going to be one of the reasons why the second Carnatic is going to start. Why? Because there are now two factions supported by the French and the English. It's about who is going to sit on the Gaddi, who is going to become the next Nizam and Nawab. Now, again, I will give you the story first and then I'll go into the detail. I hope this is working for you, because if I go into the details first, it is going to become extremely difficult. And therefore, I'm trying to keep it very simple, giving you the story, simple story, and then we'll talk about the details. Now, how does the second Carnatic War manifest itself? It manifests itself in a very simple way. What happens is that Muzaffar Jang, Chand Sahib and the French together will be able to kill Anwaruddin, and the French faction is now again dominating. Muzaffar plus French plus Chand Sahib is now the faction which is dominating, and they will be able to kill Anwaruddin and they will also be able to kill Nasir Jang. So now basically Nasir Jang is eliminated and Anwaruddin is eliminated. This means that very quickly both the sectors are in the control of the British, however, in the control of the French. However, there's one problem, and that problem is Anwaruddin has a son, and his son's name is Muhammad Ali. Now, when the French and Chand Sahib were in a way attacking and killing Anwaruddin at the Battle of Ambur, Muhammad Ali is very quickly going to move to what is today called as Trichy, Trinopoli. And now what they do is, Chand Sahib and French now create pressure on the Trinopoli fort in order to kill Muhammad Ali, so that there is no successor and therefore de facto ruler would be Chand Sahib. This is where a certain mistake is done by the French and the you can say Chand Sahib, which is they keep Arcot open. They keep Arcot open. This is going to be a very important, very important, you can say, turning point. Arcot is open. Now, at the same point of time, Muzaffar Jung is installed as the Nizam. The French take a lot of concessions. The northern Sirkars is given to the French. Debussy is now appointed as a person who's going to sit in the Nizam's court itself. They will also take a lot of concessions in the form of what we today call as basic trade concessions. However, what is going to happen is Muzaffar Jung will be killed by the infighting amongst the Nizam's nobles, and he will be killed. However, the French will be able to install another puppet. His name is Salabat Jung. I told you the second Carnatic War is a little bit complicated because multiple names are there. Anwaruddin is dead, Nasir Jung is dead, Chand Sahib and French are now pushing towards the Trinopoli fort itself, and Salabat Jung has been installed by the French once Muzaffar Jung is dead. Now, as of right now, you tell me who's winning. As of right now, who's winning this battle? Or the second Carnatic War, who's dominating this as of right now? The English or the French? Come on, tell me. Who's winning? The French. Very good. The French, as of right now, have pure control over both sectors. And this is where Robert Clive is going to come into context. Clive was sent by the British to manage this sector properly, and Clive will find a certain turning point in a certain weakness, and that is called the Siege of Arcot. What Clive will do is, he will very quickly move towards Arcot rather than trying to protect Muhammad Ali. And this is where, against the wishes of the French, Chand Sahib is going to move towards Arcot. Chand Sahib without the French is useless. Chand Sahib is useless without the French. And this is where what will happen is the English will be able to capture Chand Sahib and they will kill Chand Sahib. And once that pressure was off, now they will very quickly move to protect Muhammad Ali, and in a way, in 1 year, they are going to install Muhammad Ali in their sector. So now Carnatic, within one year of strategic moves, Chand Sahib is dead, Muhammad Ali has been now installed, British have secured the Carnatic sector. As soon as the Carnatic sector is secured, it will not take the English a lot of time to then remove the French from the what we call as Nizam sector, and they will then make Salabat Jung their puppet. And this is where the French will realize that there was a mistake which was done. Now, the first mistake was to, in a way, open Arcot and let Arcot be open. But the second mistake is the French were very quick to put all the blame on Dupleix. And they will say, Dupleix, you're useless. You are the reason why we lost this war, or the tide has turned. Dupleix did not actually miss a beat, but it was Chand Sahib's foolishness to go to Arcot that he will die. But the idea is very simple. They will then remove Dupleix and appoint a person called Godheu. And Godheu did not understand anything. And his general de Lally was even more useless. Arthur de Lally, his name was. Now what is going to happen is, the English and the French will now sign what is called as the Treaty of Pondicherry. Treaty of Pondicherry. And in the Treaty of Pondicherry, both will go back to their old positions, but now the English are controlling Carnatic sector under Muhammad Ali, and Salabat Jung and Debussy, though he's still in the court, he will now not not allow the French to expand, but will be under the influence of the English. English have now secured both the Nizam's territory and also the Carnatic sector, and then will come the joke of the century under Treaty of Pondicherry. The joke of the century under Treaty of Pondicherry was, we will not meddle into the internal politics of India. We will go back to our original positions. We will give back each other territory. That is why the joke of the century, because this was just the beginning of internal meddling by the European powers into the power struggles in India itself. They understood that there is no unity in India, and therefore it is very easy to break them like this. So Treaty of Pondicherry will restore everything back, but will show that it was very easy to influence rulers through the military might of each. And naval power, British, nobody can defeat, and industrial power at this point of time. So when we talk about the Second Carnatic War, civil wars in Hyderabad and Carnatic, now I'm adding the details. Civil war in Hyderabad and Carnatic over the issue of succession, interfering in local dynastic dispute. There are two factions which will emerge. One is Nizamul Mulk, Nasir Jung and Muzaffar Jung, son and grandson fighting, and Dost Ali, Anwaruddin and Chand Sahib. One got the French support in both, one got the English support. And this is where there will be factions which will develop. The combined armies of Muzaffar Jung, Chand Sahib and French will defeat Anwaruddin at the Battle of Ambur. Thereafter, Chand Sahib will then try to push into Trinopoli. Thereafter, French and Chand Sahib will then surround the Trinopoli fort, but it will not be a successful in that, you can say, push, because it will take time. Nasir Jung will in the background get killed, and the siege of Erkot is where they will turn the tide. Muzaffar Jung and Salabat Khan concept comes through, Salabat Jung and Muzaffar Jung concept, but it is Robert Clive who will raid Erkot, turn the attention of Chand Sahib towards that sector, in turn leading to also combined force of the Mysorean sector, Tanjore, and even the Marathas were helping the British as of right now because of the infighting. And in the end, Muhammad Ali will be installed as the Nawab of Carnatic, and the French will recall Dupleix. Godeyu will be sent. He did not understand Indian politics quite well, and the Treaty of Pondicherry will be signed. Under the Treaty of Pondicherry, both will say that we will not go into the internal matters. Both parties return to the original position, and Debussy was still kept in Nizam's court. This is called the Second Carnatic War. Before I go to the Third Carnatic War, is the Second Carnatic War sorted? Second Carnatic War. Because then we move to the third, and then we'll move to Bengal. Everyone? Second Carnatic War sorted? Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle happened for the first. Treaty of Pondicherry, I'll give you a trick, so don't worry about that. I'll give you a trick how to learn these treaties also. Okay, very good. Now, the Third Carnatic War is nothing but the repeat of the First Carnatic War. When Maria Theresa dies in 1756, basically she dies in 1756, the issue of the Austrian War of Succession now again manifests itself in the form of what is called as the 7 Years' War. 7 Years' War is exactly the same as the, you can say, Austrian War of Succession. Same issue, which is, should the successor of Maria Theresa be accepted, or the Bavarian sector is going to be accepted. And this is where again somehow these two powers are again on the opposite sides. Here again the British and the French rivalry is going to come through, and now, as in the Austrian War of Succession, it will manifest itself in the Indian sector. Now, here in the First Carnatic War, English were the aggressors. England was the first one to be aggressive. In the Third Carnatic War, it is not the English but the French. And it is where Arthur de Lally, unnecessarily, without understanding the reinforcements, is going to go and take Madras, what is today called Vishakhapatnam, and St. David, which in turn will lead to him to hold on to this sector, but he will get no support from the British, from the French, either from the Mauritius sector or from Malay, and that in turn will lead to the British very quickly moving and taking back Madras. And once the British enter, a very important decisive battle happens in India, which is called the Battle of Vandy Wash. Why is Battle of Vandy Wash considered so important? Because after the Battle of Vandy Wash, the French ceased to be a threat to the British. What is going to happen is General Coote will then move and defeat Arthur de Lally. He will take Madras, push him to Pondicherry, then enter the Pondicherry sector, and the French are very quickly going to lose all of their territory to the English. Arthur de Lally will be taken as a prisoner of war to London, but the treaty is not going to happen in India. The treaty is going to happen in Paris, because the 7 Years' War is going to end with the Treaty of Paris. Under the Treaty of Paris, the English were kind enough to give Pondicherry, Mahe, Karikal and Yanam back to the French, but only as protectorates. The French cannot wage war against the British, and through the Third Carnatic War, the story of the French as a challenge to the British is over. End of story. And therefore, the first episode of the British expanding India is over. Now, First Carnatic War, now as revised in way. First Carnatic War, Austrian War of Succession. Second Carnatic War, internal fighting. Third Carnatic War, 7 Years' War. What is the way to learn it? IPOPA, which is Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle, Treaty of Pondicherry, Treaty of Paris. This is your first, second and third Carnatic War. Are we all on the same page? Are we sorted? Yes? Carnatic War is over. Can we move to Plassey and Buxar now? Yes, sir? Quick. You have to. Very good. Crystal clear? Very good. Now, we move to Bengal. Now, when we move to Bengal, Bengal is already a troubled sector because of the 1651 and the 1717 Farman. 1651 and 1717 Farman gave the British a certain privilege, which is for 3,000 rupees. For 3,000 rupees, the British can trade in the Bengal sector without paying any taxes. No taxes. And what the British did was, they were basically, since 1717, misusing the Bengal Farman, or what is called as the Farrukhsiyar Farman. Because what they did was, 3,000 rupiah was fixed according to a certain volume. But that volume, they exceeded 10 to 12 times. So therefore, what was happening was, there was a loss to the Bengal Nawabs. You had Murshid Quli Khan, thereafter you have Sujauddin, and then we have Ali Vardi Khan. Ali Vardi Khan itself hated the British, because he saw the British as a problem in Bengal, because they were in a way misusing the farmans which were given previously. And the same hate is absorbed by the person called Siraj-ud-Dawla. Siraj-ud-Dawla, when he ascends to the throne after Ali Vardi Khan in 1756, he knows that the British are misusing the farmans given in 1651, 1717, and it is a loss to the Nawab. It is a loss to him. Siraj-ud-Dawla is losing out to the British when it comes to revenue. But he did not do anything initially. And the trigger is going to again come because of the 7 Years' War. Now, let me establish this properly. We know that Ali Vardi Khan and Siraj-ud-Dawla hate the British as it is over smart power. Now, on the two banks of Hooghly, on one side we had Fort William, which is an English establishment, which has recently been also named as Vijay Durg. And on the other side, we have the French. Chandranagar, in that regard. Two establishments, they face one another, the English and the French. Now, 7 Years' War is going to start in 1756 only. And 7 Years' War, as or the Austrian War of Succession, was obviously going to spill over into the Indian sector. Austrian War of Succession, it happened. 7 Years' War was obviously going to happen in India. We already saw that happening in the Carnatic sector. In the Austrian War of Succession, nothing happened in Bengal. But in the 7 Years' War, as soon as Anglo-French rivalry will be renewed in Europe, what they're going to do is they're going to start to fortify their settlements. Now, if you want to fortify your settlements in a preemptive way in order to avoid any form of conflict between the English and the French, you have to take the permission of the Nawab, which is Siraj-ud-Dowla. Neither did that. They started to fortify, started to install cannons without the permission of Siraj. And this is where Siraj-ud-Dowla felt that this was a breach of his sovereignty. And what is going to happen is, from Murshidabad, named after Murshid Quli Khan itself, Siraj-ud-Dowla is going to send a message to both the English and the French. Stop your fortifications. Both of you are doing it illegally. You need my permission to do fortifications. The French will comply. They will say okay. They stop the fortification. But the oversmart power the English are, they kept on doing it. They basically did not stop the construction process. The French complied, but the English did not comply. This is where Siraj-ud-Dowla said, enough is enough. Enough is enough. You already have made me extremely angry because of the way you exploit the Farmans itself. And from Murshidabad, now Siraj-ud-Dowla is going to move to Calcutta. And in order to punish the English, he is going to first capture the Qasim Bazar sector, and then he is going to capture the Fort William in February of 1756. In the February of 1756, he did not do anything to the French because the French had stopped doing it. And this is the context in which a certain incident will happen, which is called the Black Hole Incident. People call it a tragedy. Well, nothing related to the British is a tragedy. It is an incident, not a tragedy. As it is, till today, no source has confirmed the number which the British argued that 200 to 300 people died. It is Black Hole Incident. I have no sympathies for the British, and therefore I am not going to call it a tragedy. Very simply, it is an exaggeration. Yes, Tarak, it is considered to be an exaggeration. It is purely exaggerated numbers. Now, what is the Black Hole Incident? In the Black Hole Incident, what happens is, as soon as Siraj-ud-Dowla enters, he says, British, you are expelled out of Calcutta. Whichever ship is there, take it and leave it. If not, I will then make you a prisoner of war. So, for example, it is believed that close to 1,500 people used to stay within the Fort William sector. Out of that 1,500, the maximum number of Britishers would have been 300 to 400. And most of them were able to board a ship and move out of the Bengal harbor in that regard. But it is believed that 100 to 200 were left. Again, certain historians argue it was only 50-60. The British would say 500. The British exaggerated the number in order to show it as a very big tragedy. The idea is very simple. Now that he said, okay, you cannot leave today, call the ships, I will make you a prisoner. And in the Fort William, what they do is, there was a dungeon. Dungeon means Kal Kothari, a small dungeon in the basement of Fort William itself. And he will then shove again an alleged number with one window itself, an alleged number of 200 Britishers into this small room, most probably 50, 60. And when you have too many people breathing in a very confined space with no real source of oxygen, due to suffocation, in the morning, Sirajuddaula did not do it himself, his officers did it. In the morning, when Sirajuddaula is going to ask them to come out, close to 7 to 8 were dead. British will say 50 to 60 were dead. Not possible. But some people died in the process of the black hole incident. Now, this was good enough for the British to now create a public image of Siraj being a monster. And this is where now in the British newspapers, it will come through that Sirajuddaula, the monster, has killed 50 to 60 Britishers in the black hole tragedy. And this was to make sure that East India Company could now use this as a pretext to fight Sirajuddaula. Because a company fighting a ruler is something which is considered problematic. And a private company, if, for example, the Tatas and the Mahindras now start to fight an African nation, that is not a good thing. So they needed the public or the British public opinion to support them. And the black hole tragedy is now going to be used as a way of, we'll not even call it a tragedy, black hole incident is going to be used in order to now direct Clive, who was going towards the Carnatic sector, towards Bengal. So Robert Clive is now going to come to Bengal and he will challenge Sirajuddaula. Sirajuddaula and Robert Clive are going to fight at Ali Nagar, and Clive came with a very efficient army and a very, very efficient, you can say, navy. And Robert Clive will defeat Sirajuddaula in order to sign what is called today as the Treaty of Ali Nagar. This is not Battle of Plassey. This is called Treaty of Ali Nagar. Under the Treaty of Ali Nagar, Clive was able to get the Fort William back, allow for fortifications to happen, took some compensation from Sirajuddaula, and they said that you will not touch us. Clive was able to get back what they wanted. However, still by February of 1757, Clive has now re-established the control of the English over Calcutta and Fort William. But he has still not been able to do it comprehensively because the problem still remains. And this is where there's going to be a very interesting concept which will come through. Treaty of Ali Nagar has happened. Treaty of Ali Nagar has happened. And Treaty of Ali Nagar in turn leads to what is today called as the concept of the British re-establishing their control over Calcutta. Anybody has any issue in this part of the story before I move on? Anyone? Because we now move towards Plassey. I want everybody's yes here, sir, no issues. You can move ahead. We can? All good. Perfect. Now, Clive knows that the problem still remains because Sirajuddaula hates the British. And this is where he was looking for a solution, a permanent solution. Now, in Bengal politics, merchants and bankers play a very important role. Alivardi Khan was actually established, or rather Alivardi Khan was installed by the zamindars and the bankers only, because they believed that if the ruler is pro-banking and merchant, it will in turn allow for better trade. And there were two very important bankers, one called Jagat Seth, the other one called Omi Chand or Amir Chand. Now Clive receives a message from Jagat Seth. and he says, we don't like this ruler. Sirajuddaula is too oversmart. As soon as he came to power, he removed the control of Jagat Seth over his court. He also very quickly wanted to remove the control of the bankers and the merchants over the court itself. So Jagat Seth now says to Clive, I will let you know the internal politics of Bengal, and you try to break the internal, what we call as generals, and there are people who are ambitious, want to become Nawab. I will give you that intelligence or intel. This is where Jagat Seth and Omichan Amirchan basically sold off India. What they will do is, they will explain to Clive that there is a certain faction within the Bengal court which he would have never got to know, under a person called Mir Jafar. Mir Jafar is the Mir Bakshi. Mir Bakshi means that he is basically the main general. He is the commander-in-chief. He said that Mir Jafar wants to become the next ruler. And if you want to play Mir Jafar properly, there's a person called Ghasiti Begum. She's the aunt of Sirajuddaula. She also does not like Siraj too much. But in order to win against Sirajuddaula, you have to also break a person called Rai Durlab. Rai Durlab is the treasurer. And you also have to break at the same point of time, Qadim Khan. Qadim Khan is the second in command. He's basically the in charge of Calcutta. And they also argued that you have to break a person called Manik Chand. Manik Chand is also one of the important deputies of Siraj. Basically, this is called the Plassey conspiracy. Mir Jafar, Jagat Seth, Omi Chand, Manik Chand, Rai Durlab, Ghasiti Begum and Qadim Khan. Together they will hatch a plan. And that plan was very simple. Bring Siraj to Plassey. The British will instigate the Nawab. Nawab is going to fight the Battle of Plassey, which should not even be called the Battle of Plassey. It should be called the Conspiracy of Plassey. And what happens in the Battle of Plassey is that when the Nawab enters the battlefield, Qadim Khan, Mir Jafar and Manik Chand, all three retreat. And only Mohanlal and the other two very important deputies of Siraj will stand. So here, what happens is that in the Battle of Plassey, only Mir Madan and Mohanlal fight with Siraj. On the other hand, everyone else retreats, and it is the son of Mir Jafar, Miran, who will then stab the Nawab himself. This is why it is called not a battle. It's not a battle because nobody fought. Plassey was a setup. Plassey was a conspiracy. The conspiracy was bring Sirajuddaula to Plassey. Then nobody is going to fight. Mir Jafar's son is going to kill Nawab. Only two deputies will fight. Three major contingents of Sirajuddaula did not fight this war. And this is where the Battle of Plassey opens the gate. Does not open fully. The foot of the British is now into the Bengal politics. The story is not still complete, but Plassey has happened. Plassey will in turn lead to what is called as the first loot of Bengal. This is called the first loot of Bengal. Now Clive will become from a beggar in Europe and in England to a lord. Mir Jafar will become a pure dependent puppet ruler of the English. The British will now start to sit through a resident in Murshidabad. 24 Parganas is given to the British. British officers will have to pay no taxes whatsoever, so they can do private trading. Further, other European powers need to be removed. The French are removed from the Bengal sector. 50 lakh rupees is given by Mir Jafar as a bribe. Further, the Clive takes a lot of money as what is called as Jagir, or as a form of gift to himself. And the French will cease to control in this whole sector, or in this sector itself. Why do I say that Clive was nothing before Plassey? Because he actually was nothing. He was just one general. The amount of money which he will take out of the first and the second Bengal loot, he was actually going to get a House of Lords position. The idea is very simple. Mir Jafar is very quickly going to realize what blunder he has done. Very quickly. He'll very, very quickly realize what is the blunder he's done, which is that he's now bankrupted the Nawab's treasury. And Mir Jafar is going to try to correct his mistake in what is called as the Battle of Chinsura, or the Battle of Bedara. Mir Jafar, in order to remove Clive, will go to the Dutch and say to the Dutch, I will give you some money, please defeat the English for me, and I will then give you that money and you can be happy and we both have a win-win situation. The Dutch will agree also that we'll fight the British, but the British will defeat the Dutch in the Battle of Chinsura or Bedara in 1759. And now the same person who had been a puppet to the British will now basically try to cut the British itself. The British were not going to like it, obviously. And this is where within 2 years, Mir Jafar will be removed, and now comes into the picture Mir Qasim. Qasim is the replacement of Mir Jafar. But Qasim already knew what the English could do. And this is where Mir Qasim from the get-go itself actually wanted to undercut the British. And what Mir Qasim will do is, he will first shift his, you can say, capital from Murshidabad to Munger. But before he did that, the second loot of Bengal will happen. The second loot of Bengal was Burdwan, Midnapur, Chittagong given to the British. The Chuna trade, limestone trade, half of the revenue has to be shared by the with the British. Pay off all outstanding dues. Help the British in the third Carnatic War. 5 lakh rupees was taken for that. And Mir Qasim was told, your enemies are our enemy, we will help you. But Mir Qasim knew that they are making a fool out of him. That is where Mir Qasim, as soon as the second loot of Bengal is going to happen, he will start to now try to undercut the British. First, shifting his capital from Murshidabad to Munger, then appointing his own men into important positions. He tries to modernize his army, does not have the resources for it, but he will then do something which was a no-no for the British. The advantage which the British had vis-a-vis the other traders in Bengal was, British traders did not give any form of taxes. So Mir Qasim said, okay, let's do one thing, which is that we will now very simply remove all forms of taxes out of the whole Bengal sector itself, which is that the British, what advantage they had with regards to taxation, that will be removed, and Mir Qasim removes all taxes on all merchants. And this is where the British will feel that first Jafar betrayed them, and now Mir Qasim is also acting. So what they will do is, they will remove Mir Qasim and bring back Mir Jafar. But now Qasim was trying to resist the British. And now Qasim will start to run. He will start to run, and first he will try to fight in Bengal. He will not be able to. So Qasim will go to Awadh. and he will meet with a person called Sujaud-Dowla. He will say to Sujaud-Dowla, things are going out of hand in the Bengal sector. Please help me fight the British. Sujaud-Dowla will say, why not also involve the Mughal emperor? His name Shah Alam II, something which I taught just today morning in the class itself, which is Shah Alam II will now say, okay, let's try to fight, and there will be a tripartite alliance which will be created, which is called Awadh plus Delhi plus Mir Qasim tripartite alliance, and this will fight with the British. And this fight is called the Battle of Buxar. The Battle of Buxar on 22nd October 1764, Qasim plus Sujaud-Dowla rather, and Shah Alam II will fight the British. British under Thomas Munro are going to win this battle. And in the Battle of Buxar, now comes the Treaty of Allahabad. We will use the word Allahabad still because it's a specific acronym, now Prayagraj in that regard. But the word Treaty of Allahabad will stand because in the context of what we call as academic understanding, it will remain because it is a specific context. Remember this point. In specificities, we cannot change the word. If I say Allahabad, no, Prayagraj. But Treaty of Allahabad will remain Treaty of Allahabad. Now, in the Treaty of Allahabad, what is going to happen is the most important concession will be given to the British, which is called the Diwani rights of Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa. And this is where it is believed that the foot which was in the door through Plassey, Buxar was more decisive because Shah Alam II is going to become a pensioner of the English. The Mughal emperor himself has become subservient to the English. And at the same point of time, now the Diwani, revenue collecting rights from Bengal, Bihar and Orissa will be there. And this will change the nature of trade, something which we'll discuss separately. The implications of the Battle of Buxar are huge. Diwani rights is going to transform the East India Company from just a commercial power to a territorial power. And that territorial power and revenue is going to then change the balance of payment between Britain and India and forever change the politics in India itself. From imperialism, now the British have become a colonialistic power. Is Bengal sorted? Everyone, is Bengal sorted? We are now done with two sectors. We are done with the battle of, or the Carnatic battle, and we are done with Bengal. Two sectors sorted. Very good, perfect. So I hope that you understand that only one treaty is there, Allahabad, Plassey, Buxar. Simple, straightforward. Jafar, Qasim, Jafar, and Sujaud-Dowla and Shah Alam II. Simple, straightforward concepts, not something out of the box. Now, let's talk about the Marathas. Now, there are three Anglo-Maratha wars. But in order to understand the Anglo-Maratha wars, we have to go a little bit backwards. Because when I say Peshwa rule, it needs a little bit of, yes, British won at Buxar, needs a little bit of context. Meaning, what do you mean by Chhatrapati rule? What do you mean by Peshwa rule? Now we know that Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj established the Maratha Empire. At a very young age, he showed a lot of prowess. One of the most towering statesmen and one of the best fighters and administrators in India by far. But after Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, Maratha rule becomes a little bit problematic, specifically after Sambhaji Maharaj. And this is where the context of a person called Shahuji comes into context. Now, Shahuji was in captivity of the Mughals since 1689. And because he was in captivity, the grandson of Chhatrapati Maharaj himself, Chhatrapati Shahuji, not Chhatrapati right now, but he's going to become Chhatrapati. And because he is in Mughal captivity, Tarabai, she will be ruling in the name of her son, Shivaji II, Chhatrapati Shivaji II, and because her husband had died, Ram Raja, basically she was the regent to Shivaji II. She was the regent to Shivaji II. Now this is where in 1707, Shahuji will be released after the death of Aurangzeb. And now he challenges Tarabai. He challenges Tarabai. The concept is very, very simple. He says that I am the Chhatrapati and I am the rightful Chhatrapati in that regard. And this is where basically there is going to be a certain civil war. There is going to be a certain civil war which is going to happen. And that civil war is between Shahuji and Tarabai. And this is where you will see that there is internal politics happening in the Maratha sector, which will in turn lead to a certain inroad of the British, which I will develop in front of you. Shahuji is fighting with Tarabai, and now will come a very important personality. His name, Balaji Vishwanath. Now, Balaji Vishwanath was the Senakarte, which is the very important position, which is like the Senapati of the Marathas. And rather than supporting Tarabai, he is going to support Shahuji in this battle. So this war of succession which is happening after Shahuji is released, and it is the fight between Tarabai and Shahuji, Balaji Vishwanath is going to support Shahuji. And just because of the support of Balaji Vishwanath, Shahuji is going to win this war of succession. He's going to win the war of succession. And now Shahuji will be made Chhatrapati Shahuji Maharaj. So this is where Shahuji comes back. I'm again repeating myself. Once the Mughals are able to make inroads into the Maratha sector, Tarabai was ruling in the name of Shivaji II. Once Shahuji, who was in captivity since 1689, he will be released in 1707 after the death of Aurangzeb. He will come back to Maratha politics, which will in turn lead to a war of succession or a civil war within the Marathas itself between Shahuji and Tarabai. And this is where, because of that politics, Balaji Vishwanath, who was a very important officer, rather than supporting the, you can say, de facto ruler Tarabai, he will support Shahuji and therefore allow Shahuji to then win this war of succession and become Chhatrapati Shahuji Maharaj. Everybody on the same page with me? Because still we have to reach still Raghunath Rao. So we are still very far away from the basic politics itself, right? Okay. Now, Chhatrapati Shahuji Maharaj was like he did not have real power. Balaji Vishwanath will establish or will take up the position of Peshwa, the Prime Minister, and with the rise of Balaji Vishwanath, we believe that the Maratha politics is now gone into the resurgence under Peshwas. This is called Peshwa rule. This is called Peshwa rule. And this is where from the Chhatrapati rule, Maratha politics has gone into Peshwa rule. I am simplifying this for the examination. There are multiple layers here, but I am trying to simplify it for you. Simple, straightforward point is, with the rise of Peshwa Balaji Vishwanath, Chhatrapati Shahuji Maharaj has been now established at Satara and Pune rather. And what is going to now happen is, the real power, like the Prime Minister and the President, de facto power will be with Balaji Vishwanath, and Chhatrapati Shahuji Maharaj is going to be de jure power in the name of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. The Peshwas will rule, but the real power will remain with the Peshwas. Why is this episode so important? Because the expansion of the Marathas will then happen because of the Peshwas themselves. So we have Peshwa Balaji Vishwanath. He is going to be able to establish his rule. He will then make the Peshwa power extremely powerful. He was a Sena Karte, he will then become Peshwa. He will also be able to take multiple concessions in the what we call as Deccan sector and will be able to extract Chauth and Sardeshmukhi out of it. But thereafter he will be succeeded by no one else. Again a very important pillar and a very powerful personality of Maratha politics, Peshwa Bajirao I. He did not lose any battle, was able to make the Mughals give all of the Malwa sector, all of the Deccan sector. He was the one who will make the Mughals become subservient to the Marathas itself, to the Treaty of Sironj. And Bajirao I is also going to do one thing, which is he will introduce what is called as the Confederacy model. The Confederacy model was all the families, rather than infighting, he will now establish a Confederacy model in which all of them will have their own zones. All of them will have their own zones, and those zones are going to be very, very important. Those zones are going to be very, very important because now the Bhosles, the Holkars, the Sindhyas and the Gaikawads, along with the Pune sector, they have their own zones. They will not infight, strengthening the Maratha power. That ways, Bajirao I is considered to be one of the most powerful rulers. And looking at this map, you can see the heartland of India. This is where the Marathas were able to create a very powerful state by 1800. Thereafter, after the Bajirao I, we have mixed the names together. Balaji Bajirao as the next Peshwa. He had multiple important contributions. Chhatrapati Shahuji Maharaj is going to die. So he will appoint another, you can say, or he will push another de jure power in the form of Ram Raja as the next Chhatrapati. But he will also get involved into Mughal politics, because by this point of time, Mughals have become purely subservient, have no power to control their own territories itself. And in return for the Chauth and Sardeshmukhi in the northwestern sector, there will be a treaty which will be signed between the Marathas and the Mughals in 1751, which is that in lieu of the Chauth and Sardeshmukhi of the northwestern sector in and around Delhi, the Marathas will protect the Mughals from any external internal threat. And this is where Balaji Bajirao is going to then get, in a way, involved into a conflict wherein the Marathas had removed a governor of a person called Ahmad Shah Abdali, an invader who had entered into India multiple times. And this will put Ahmad Shah Abdali and the Marathas at odds. And this in turn will lead to what is called as the Third Battle of Panipat in 1761. And in the Third Battle of Panipat, Balaji Bajirao is going to send his son, Vishwas Rao, and a very important personality considered to be the next Peshwa in that regard, if Vishwas Rao was not there, Sadashiva Rao Bhau. And both of them will then basically command an army in the Third Battle of Panipat against Abdali. Unfortunately, the Marathas will be defeated by Abdali, Vishwas Rao will die, and Sadashiva Rao Bhau will die. And this will in turn lead to a shock to Balaji Bajirao, a old man himself. And Balaji Bajirao is going to then also die. This will create a power vacuum within the Maratha politics itself. And this is where Madhav Rao the first is going to be established as the next Peshwa, but because he was a child, he will be under the regency of a person called Raghunath Rao. Now, Raghunath Rao was power hungry in that regard. Madhav Rao the first, as soon as he will become an adolescent, he will start to understand politics well. He will remove Raghunath Rao from the politics itself. But Raghunath Rao still had a certain aspiration to be Peshwa. This is where between Madhav Rao the first period, there's stability. They will be able to defeat the Mysorean sector also. Hyder will be defeated multiple times by Madhav Rao the first. However, as soon as Madhav Rao will die, the next Peshwa is going to be Narayan Rao. And what is going to happen is Narayan Rao will be killed by Raghunath Rao. And this is where Raghunath Rao will install himself as the next Peshwa. Something which he did through deceit. And this will not be liked by a very important officer in the Maratha Empire. His name Nana Fadnavis. Nana Fadnavis, along with other 11 officers, called the Bharbhai conspiracy. In this, they will remove Raghunath Rao and install Madhav Rao II as the next Peshwa. And from this point forward, the British will get involved. Just to give you a basic recap of this, Balaji Vishwanath, Baji Rao the first, Balaji Baji Rao, Madhav Rao, Narayan Rao, killed by Raghunath Rao, Raghunath Rao removed by Bharbhai conspiracy, and Madhav Rao II is going to come into context. This is the backstory which you need to know to understand Maratha politics and Anglo-Maratha wars. Is this making sense to everyone? Basic internal politics of the Marathas. Because once Bharbhai conspiracy will remove Raghunath Rao, then we will see the first Anglo-Maratha war coming through. Yes? Very good. Now, as soon as Raghunath Rao is removed, again I'm giving you the basic picture. As soon as Raghunath Rao is removed from the position of Peshwa, he will do a very big blunder. And that blunder is Raghunath Rao is going to then go to the British. And he will sign what is called as the Treaty of Surat. Now the first Anglo-Maratha war concept has already started. Under the Treaty of Surat, the British were ready to provide Raghunath Rao with 2,500 soldiers, and the British were happy to help Raghunath Rao to bring back him to power and remove Nana Fadnavis and Madhav Rao II. However, as soon as the British accept this, the proposal is sent to the Bombay Council and then to the Calcutta Council. The British Council say, we don't want to get into Maratha politics. Full no. And what happens is, there is a revision of the treaty which is called as the Treaty of Purandar. The power of the Marathas was such that the British dare not touch the Marathas at this point of time. They said, this Raghunath Rao politics, we don't want to enter the Maratha politics because Marathas are too powerful. So in the Treaty of Purandar, what is going to happen is, they will, without even the intervention of Nana Fadnavis or any other form of battle, they will automatically say, Raghunath Rao, we'll give you a pension. We don't want to get into Maratha politics. We will be happy to protect you, but we will not fight with Nana Fadnavis for you. So this is where Treaty of Purandar, they have already backtracked on their understanding. And the British will now not try to enter into Maratha politics. But their hand will be forced in 1777. In 1777, what is going to happen is that the that Nana Fadnavis is going to give a port to the French, something which the English don't like. And the English will do the foolishness of challenging Nana Fadnavis. What they will do is that they will fight what is called as the Battle of Talegaon. And in the Battle of Talegaon, Nana Fadnavis will give a crushing defeat to the British, humiliate the British. Well deserved also, humiliate the British. And now Nana Fadnavis will say, you dare not enter into this politics. And what he will do is, he will say, now you share 50% of the revenue from Bombay and all the ports on the western sector are now mine. He will say, you act like this god-like personality. You want to get into internal politics. I'll tell you what is internal politics. This treaty is called the Treaty of Vadgaon. Vadgaon was considered one of the most humiliating treaties which the British ever signed. And it was befittingly a Maratha who made them do that. Now, through the Treaty of Vadgaon, the British now feel humiliated. They've lost Bombay, half revenue. They've lost most of their ports on the western coast. So now Warren Hastings is sent to India with the mandate to undo this. And this is where Warren Hastings is now going to challenge Nana Fadnavis. Second time lucky, Warren Hastings will be able to defeat Nana Fadnavis. But they dare not push a humiliating treaty. And what they sign is called the Treaty of Salbai. In the Treaty of Salbai, the British say, please give us all the territory back. Please, we will not share that 50% revenue. Rather, let's do one thing. Treaty of mutual non-aggression. Meaning, if you will be attacked, we will help you. If we are attacked, you help us. The British very quickly realized that the Marathas were too powerful in the 1775 and 80s period. That is why the British will not touch the Marathas for the next 20 years. They knew that in 1770s and 80s and 90s, Marathas are too powerful. And therefore, there are basically three treaties within the first Anglo-Maratha War, which is called Puvasa. Purandar, Vadgaon, Salbai. This is the first Anglo-Maratha War. Ends with an understanding that we will be happy to recognize Madhav Rao II. We will be happy to not fight with you. Treaty of Salbai was very straightforward, which is we will not fight with you. We would rather not get into your politics. Are we sorted with regards to first Anglo-Maratha War? Anglo-Maratha War first only shows you that the Marathas are extremely powerful at this point of time. Yes? Everyone? Okay, perfect. Now, in 1782, the Treaty of Salbai was signed, and till 1803, 1806, the British dare not enter. But the inroad into Maratha politics will come because of Anglo-Maratha War, because of again a war of succession. I hope you are able to understand that there's a pattern here. There's a pattern here. And that pattern is basically war of successions are being used by the British to enter into the politics. We are giving them inroads into our politics. This is where we basically gave India on a platter. We very beautifully decorated that platter called Indian subcontinent, and we gave it to the British. British only played the wait and watch game. They just waited for things to go bad, and like Raghunath Rao, who invited the British into Maratha politics, same thing is going to happen as soon as Madhav Rao II is going to die. As soon as Madhav Rao II dies, Now comes to power Baji Rao II. Now comes to power Baji Rao II. Now, Baji Rao II is the son of Raghunath Rao. And this is where the Maratha families were not very comfortable with this aspect. They were not happy that the son of Raghunath Rao, a person who had involved the British into Maratha politics, had now become the ruler or become the Peshwa. And this is where, though the Sindhyas will stand with Baji Rao II, Yashwant Rao Holkar will say, enough of this Raghunath Rao family, I will take control of the Peshwaship. And this is where Baji Rao II and the Sindhyas will fight with Yashwant Rao Holkar. Internal warfare. Again civil war. Holkars versus Poona and Sindhya, which is Baji Rao II, Sindhyas versus Yashwant Rao Holkar. And Yashwant Rao Holkar is going to now defeat this alliance between Baji Rao II and Sindhyas. But unfortunately, what father had done, the son will also do. Which is, as soon as he will be defeated by Yashwant Rao Holkar, he will move to the British. And he will now sign a death note for the Marathas. And that is called the Treaty of Basin. Why? Because the Treaty of Basin will unfortunately mean that Baji Rao II has signed a subsidiary alliance with the British. If you know anything about the subsidiary alliance, you would know that as soon as you sign the subsidiary alliance, you are now giving your defense to the British. This will disgust all other families of the Maratha Confederacy, and this was totally uncalled for. If I show you the provisions of the Treaty of Basin, you will then realize how big a mistake Baji Rao II had done. Under the Treaty of Subsidiary Alliance or the Treaty of Basin itself, the Peshwa was now under the protection of the company. Now, British Army was going to be stationed at Poona. A large annual subsidy and transfer would happen money would be transferred between the Marathas and the British. Foreign relations would now be under the control of the British. Peshwa surrendered the city of Surat fully to the British. Further, the Peshwa will stop taking chauth from an ally of the British itself, which is the Nizam. British troops were permanently kept under the Maratha territory, and the Marathas would have to disband their own army. That is a necessity under subsidiary alliance. This meant that by accepting these terms, the Marathas had now, under Baji Rao II, accepted the subservience when it comes to military to the British. And this is where people argue and historians argue and everybody argues that it is the second Anglo-Maratha war where India was lost. The last bid, the only alternative to any other power in India, and the only power which could have united India against the British and kept India as one unit under an Indian native rule, the Marathas, was lost. That hope was lost. Because Baji Rao II now in a way allowed the British to control everything. And he will realize his mistake. And the mistake will be realized under the third Anglo-Maratha War. Baji Rao II will very quickly realize that he has actually gave up all control to the British resident, and now he will try to bring the confederacies together in 1870. But by that time, the battle was already lost. And because the British were now in the mood to control the Maratha territory properly, they will defeat each of these families separately and then make the Maratha territory their own, thereby creating what is today called as, or used to be called as, Bombay Presidency. He will move from Poona. there was too much indiscipline and you can say disunity. Through 3 different wars, Holkar, Scindias and the Peshwas will be defeated at Khirki, at Sitabudi and at Mahidpur, and the Marathas will cease to be a threat to the British once their territory is going to be annexed by the British itself. And this is where our story of the Anglo-Maratha Wars is over. In the Anglo-Maratha Wars, we have Pu, Va, Sa, Ba. Purandar, Vadgaon, Salbai Basin. India's most important hope was lost because of infighting and the actions of Raghunath Rao and Baji Rao II. Sorted, everyone? Is the concept of Anglo-Maratha War sorted? One of the most complicated because there's a long backstory to it. I hope it makes sense. I have in a lot of places simplified the story. In nowhere this is the complete Maratha history. In nowhere I have discussed the internal squabbles. I have nowhere talked about Chhatrapati Shambhaji Maharaj. I have not discussed the transition from Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj till Shahuji and Tarabai. That is pure medieval, and maybe we'll have a discussion with regards to Maratha politics on the same platform soon. But as of right now, I hope through this simplification, you have been able to understand the whole concept itself, which is, if you can remember this sequence, Balaji Vishwanath, Baji Rao, Balaji Baji Rao, thereafter Madhav Rao, then Narayan Rao, Raghunath Rao, Madhav Rao II, you will be able to understand basic politics in that regard. So I hope this simplification has been fruitful in that regard. I have done it at the cost of continuity and for your understanding in that regard. I hope that works for you. Now, let's move to the third part of our discussion, the Anglo-Mysore Wars. Now, when we talk about Anglo-Mysore, we don't have 1, but 4 battles. Now, the Mysorean sector is quite pragmatically, or you can say it is in a very precarious situation, because on its east, it has the Carnatic sector, which is hostile. In its north, it has the Nizam, who's again hostile. Again, if they go towards the Maharashtra coast, they have the Marathas, who are again hostile. Travancore is also hostile. And that way, they are locked within all 4 sides by what we call as powers, which basically are hostile to its own territory. The Vodeyars were the ones who had established this sector. Chikdevraya Vodeyar was the one who established as an independent area as Mysore. Nanjaraj was his prime minister. Nanjaraj considered to be extremely problematic. So therefore, Hyder Ali, a small officer of the same army itself, is going to capture power, and he will then establish Mysorean power in this sector. Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan, very important personalities, also quite decisive, and you can say they were decisive for the politics here, but they're also quite controversial figures. Hyder Ali is going to very quickly realize one thing, and this is where at least Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan, more Hyder Ali, less Tipu Sultan, but both of them were conscious that the real problem in the peninsular sector is not the infighting or the Marathas or the Nizam or this and that. It was the British, because the British were playing all sides. So they very quickly developed a hatred for the British, and they also realized through the Carnatic Wars, which they have observed, that the decisiveness or the power of the British comes from their army. So they will start to modernize their army, and for that they will take help from no one else but the French. And this is where the English started to hate the Mysorean sector, because the Mysorean sector was taking help from no one else but the French. An Anglo-French rivalry is something which is already there. But what is a subset here is that there is also a lot of, you can say, animosity between the Marathas and Hyder Ali. Under Madhav Rao Madhav the first, Mysore will be defeated multiple times, 64, 66, 71. But when Madhav Rao II is going to die, Madhav the first is going to die, there will be Hyder Ali's raids into this sector and he will take most of this territory back. This is where you should understand one thing, which is that Marathas had a very, you can say, problematic relationship with the Mysorean sector. If they both had any form of unity, the English had no chance in this sector as it is, because both very powerful sectors in that regard, Marathas on a different level altogether. Now, the interesting aspect here is that all the Anglo-Mysore wars were, in a way, at least the first two, were basically like checking each other. They were trying to check one another. Now, the checking happens in this way. Hyder Ali, now I'm discussing the first Anglo-Mysore war with you. Hyder Ali had a good relationship with the French. He is modernizing his army. He is modernizing his sector itself. And Carnatic sector has a dispute, border dispute or territorial dispute with the Mysorean sector. Who controls the Carnatic sector after 1763? Who controls this sector? De facto power is in whose control? Under whose control is it? After the Third Carnatic War. De facto rule. I am asking you something which I have done just 1.5 hours before. Muhammad Ali, which means who is under control or who has pure control. Very good. Mumtaz. The British. The British want to check the Mysorean sector, and the British control to the Third Carnatic War the Carnatic sector itself. So now what they do is that the British try to poke Hyder Ali. And the first Anglo-Mysore war, what happens is they both fight. They both fight. But there is no conclusive battle. Sometimes Hyder Ali wins. Sometimes the British win. For 1.5 years, they're going to fight. Nothing is going to happen. So then both will sign a treaty which is called the Treaty of Madras. They will come back to their position. Basically, the British were checking Mysore. How powerful is Mysore? And in a very interesting way, even before the Marathas were offered under Treaty of Salbai, the concept of mutual non-aggression and third-party aggression, the British wanted to create a good relationship with the Mysorean sector via the Treaty of Madras. So under the Treaty of Madras, they said, okay, let's exchange our territories. I will protect you, you protect me. This offer came before Salbai. And therefore, the British were now playing both the Marathas and the Mysorean sector. But they will then be forced to choose one side when it will be the second, which will in turn become the trigger for the second Anglo-Mysore war. The idea is very simple. The Marathas will invade into the Mysorean sector. Under the Treaty of Madras, the British should have responded. But the British are too scared of the Marathas. Therefore, what they did was, rather than helping Mysore, they are going to stand by the Marathas. This is where Hyder Ali will feel extremely betrayed and will feel that the British are just playing tit-for-tat politics, internal politics. They're playing all the sides. And this is where now he will ask the French to accelerate their help to the Mysorean sector so that they can, in a way, establish their control properly, and also the relationship between the French and the Mysorean sector becomes better. At the same point of time, the French were helping the Americans fight the American War of Independence, And this is where the British were able to see a pattern. French are helping the Americans. From Malay, the French are helping the Mysorean sector. In order to check that, the English will attack Malay, and this will in turn create the context for the second Anglo-Mysore War. Again, they will fight for 2.5 years. Nothing really is going to happen. But the second Anglo-Mysore War is going to end on a certain note, which is with the death of Hyder Ali in 1782. And now the son of Hyder Ali, Tipu Sultan, will come to power. Tipu Sultan will then try to manage this war properly, and they will end this war through what is called as the Treaty of Mangalore. The Treaty of Mangalore. Through the Treaty of Mangalore, they will say, let's go back to our original positions. And as I said, the first two Anglo-Mysore wars are going to be inconclusive. They will not be decisive in creating any form of. You can say either the British were showing a lot of promise or the Mysorean sector. Mysore was matching British power as of right now. But the British will then realize they need a permanent solution. Therefore, they will start to develop alliances. And this is where the third Anglo-Mysore War comes through. Now, are we sorted with the first and the second Anglo-Mysore Wars? Are we? Anglo-Mysore Wars, first and second. Madras and Treaty of Mangalore. We sorted, everyone? Malay was never under the British. It was a different space altogether. They just exchanged the territories in India. The French ceased to be as it is a problem thereafter. But the point was, French support was there. Suffren was the one who used to help Hyder Ali too much. Suffren was also recalled. A lot of blunder done by the French in that regard. Okay. Now the third Anglo-Mysore War was the most decisive one. And this is where the British came up with a very interesting plan. Now there are two you can say territories held by the Dutch in this sector. One is called Jalkotal and the other one is called Cannanore. Cannanore and Jalkotal. Now, by the time we come to the 1790s, the Dutch lose interest in India. As it is, they had been defeated through the Battle of Bedara and Chinsura, and they wanted to concentrate on the Indonesian sector. So they were looking to sell Cannanore and Jalkotal. Now, Cannanore and Jalkotal both are actually territories of the Mysorean sector because they come under Kochi. And Kochi, in a way, is a subsidiary, a feudatory, if you want to call it, a subsidiary of the Mysorean sector itself. Now, what happens is that in this sector, Travancore says to the Dutch, we will buy Jalkotal and Cannanore from you. Now, this is what Tipu Sultan sees as a breach of sovereignty, because without the permission of Tipu Sultan, no transaction in this sector can be done. So basically, the trigger for the third Anglo-Mysore War is going to come when Travancore is going to take Jalkotal and Cannanore from the Dutch. This is where Tipu Sultan will try to assert his power over the Travancore sector, and he will attack Travancore. Now here the British saw an opportunity. So the British will now start to say in the Peninsula sector, this bigger power is trying to harass the smaller power. Travancore is now being harassed by Mysore. What kind of injustice is this? The idea was to take the help of the Carnatic, the Marathas, and the Nizam to then create a fourfold alliance of the British, Carnatic, Nizam, and the Marathas to fight on behalf of Travancore against Tipu Sultan. And therein lies the disunity of this sector again, wherein British said, no, we will not let injustice happen. You can't defeat a small power like this. We have a sense of justice. We will protect Travancore. And in this process, they will then create a fourfold alliance to protect Travancore, and Tipu Sultan had no chance, literally no chance. A battle on four fronts would never be won by Tipu Sultan. Tipu Sultan will thereafter be defeated. He will give a lot of resistance, but he will be defeated in the Third Anglo-Mysore War. And he will sign one of the most humiliating treaties ever signed by any other Indian ruler, which is called the Treaty of Seringamapatnam. In the Treaty of Seringamapatnam, close to 1/3 to 1/4 of the Mysorean territory was now cut into pieces and given to all the victors. And thereafter, his sons were kept hostage, and Tipu Sultan was left to his own mercy and his own understanding. The idea was very simple. Nizam got the areas between Krishna and Pennar River. The war damages was 3 crore rupees. 2 of his sons was kept as hostage. Nearly half of the Mysorean territory was taken. Barmal, Didugal and Malabar went to the English, and the Marathas took the areas in and around the Tungabhadra and its tributaries. Basically, cake was cut and divided amongst the victors. Treaty of Seringamapatnam, considered to be one of the most humiliating treaties. This is also called, and this is where the 3 treaties of Anglo-Mysores are over. The code is Madman Seri. Madras, Mangalore, Seringamapatnam. And Treaty of Seringamapatnam more or less made sure that the fate of Indian politics was sealed in that regard. And thereafter, it was very clear that Tipu Sultan ceases to be a threat. Though he was alive, ceases to be a threat. Now, the context for the Fourth Anglo-Mysore War is actually not in India, but with the rise of Napoleon. Napoleon, through a coup, captured the Directory rule in 1799, which is called as Consulate rule. Tipu Sultan was recouping his power between 1790 and 1799. And now with Wellesley in India, one thing was very, very clear, that he did not want Napoleon to give support to Tipu Sultan. Because if Tipu Sultan and Napoleon come together, then the British have a formidable, with the continental blockade coming in the British sector in the English Channel via Napoleon, then thereafter also declaring war in what is called as the Napoleonic Wars in 1802. The British did not want to take any chance with Tipu Sultan creating an alliance with Napoleon. And this is where a preemptive war is going to be fought by the English in what is called as the Fourth Anglo-Mysore War. And they will not sign a treaty, but just kill Tipu Sultan. And a very, you can say, it's a very interesting story and how he died. The British were not even confirmed if Tipu Sultan was dead or not. Tipu Sultan by this point of time had become extremely paranoid, was also equally, you can say, intolerant at this point of time, had done a lot of massacres in that sense. But the idea is very simple. Tipu Sultan's death in turn meant that Mysore ceased to be a problem. And once that is done, all of the Mysorean territory is then divided amongst the victors. The British will take up most of the territory from Kanara to Wayanad to Coimbatore to Dwarapuram to Seringamapatnam. Nizam is going to be given Gutti and Gurukonda, and the Marathas will also be given a little bit of territory, but the Marathas will also cease to be a problem very soon, by the turn of the century itself. Now, this is where, before we move to Anglo-Sikh, which is the last part of our discussion, in a very efficient manner, I think in 2 hours, we have been able to cover 3 major wars: Carnatic, Bengal, Marathas, and Mysore. That was good pace. And the idea is very simple. Till this point, we have seen Carnatic, I, Po, Pa. Thereafter, we have been able to discuss Bengal, Plassey, Buxar, Treaty of Allahabad. And thereafter, we have been able to understand Maratha, 3 Maratha wars. Pu, Va, Sa, Ba, then Maratha territory taken. And we've also been able to understand Mysore, which is the mad man Seri and the annexation of Mysore. I hope till this point we are all on the same page, and I hope that you now understand it's a complex sector, but it is not that difficult to understand. It's not that difficult to understand if you understand the basics in that regard and if you stay away from unnecessary detail. I hope that ways this session has been useful for you to remove that fear from you. I'm keep on giving you these tricks to learn it. In the end, I will also share a trick how to learn the sequence in that regard. But the idea is very simple. The idea is very simple, to remove the clutter of this area and also understand these basics so that you're able to answer any question. I've used a lot of names, but that is secondary if you understand the basic stories. Now we move to the last discussion, which is the Anglo-Sikh or Anglo-Sikh War, which basically sealed the fate of India, more or less, but happens very late, 1845, 1848, 2 wars only. Now, when we talk about the Sikhs, we know that the Sikh religion rose as either, there are two basic understandings, either as part of the Bhakti movement or the part of as a third or the third path or a middle path to two major religions which were there in the northwestern sector, which is Islam and Hinduism. Now, through the Guru tradition, we saw that the Mughals got involved into the Sikh politics, and that was through the Har Rai, Ram Rai and Har Kishan controversy itself. But the point was that it was Guru Gobind Singh who realized that Sikhism would not survive if not protected from within. And this is where, because of the death of his sons, he will create what is called as the Khalsa, which is going to protect Sikhism, the military wing of Sikhism itself. And he also made the book Guru Granth Sahib as the eternal Guru, ending the tradition of human gurus, or gurus as personified by humans. And Sikhism thereafter was able to survive because of these two very important moves. But Khalsa, in a way, was evolving. And what Khalsa evolved into is called missiles. The word is missile. Basically, missile is nothing but military brotherhood, which is that the whole Sikh empire got divided into 12 missiles. These Khalsas evolving into bigger groups. The 12 missiles together were able to then divide power amongst them. But this was not good for the Sikh political space, because this in turn leads to infighting. This also leads to a lot of internal conflict in that regard. And therefore, what happens is the Sikhs now start to evolve an internal conflict. Internal conflict is not good for any state. And this is where one important personality in the Sukhachakya missile is going to realize, if we go in this direction, the Sikh empire is going to be divided into not one but 12 different states. His name, Ranjit Singh, also called Maharaja Ranjit Singh. Now, Ranjit Singh, what he will do is, he will start to consolidate all these 12 missiles together to create a very powerful empire, which is called the Sikh Empire under Ranjit Singh. Ranjit Singh used force, used violence, whatever it may be. He used blood and iron to bring all these 12 missiles together. He also was able to take control of the Lahore sector, parts of Afghanistan, through Zaman Shah. But his most important, you can say, activity was that he modernized the army, second best to the Marathas. But at the same point of time, he signed what is called as the Treaty of Amritsar, or the Treaty of Perpetual Friendship. And that too with the English. The idea was, the Satluj River was made as the border between the English and the Sikhs. English control anything west of the Satluj, anything rather east of the Satluj, anything west of the Satluj was under the Punjab state or Ranjit Singh state. This made sure that Ranjit Singh did not have a border issue, And Ranjit Singh also had a powerful army, so therefore the English were also happy to sign the Treaty of Perpetual Friendship or the Treaty of Amritsar. Till Ranjit Singh is alive, everything is sorted. But as soon as Ranjit Singh dies, things go bad very quickly because of infighting again. Ranjit Singh is going to die. Ranjit Singh is then going to be succeeded by his son, Khadak Singh. But Khadak Singh is going to be killed by his own generals. Then will come his next son, Nauniyal Singh. He will also be killed by infighting. Thereafter, you will have Sher Singh, the third son of Ranjit Singh. He will also be killed because of his generals and infighting. And finally, we will have Dilip Singh. Dilip Singh was just a child. He had two very important personalities attached to him. One is you have Rani Jindal and you have Hira Singh. Hira Singh is his prime minister or Wazir as it was called, and Rani Jindal is the regent. Rani Jindal is the regent. Again, as I said, war of succession, standard thematic which will be there. Now, things were still okay. But as you know, people have ambition. And there's a person called Lal Singh. Lal Singh and Teja Singh are two generals holding one of the two biggest contingents. Lal Singh wanted to become the prime minister. So what the British did was that they rather approached Lal Singh. They were able to see all of this, you can say, infighting and a lot of deaths. So the British approached Lal Singh and they said to Lal Singh, do one thing. You breach the Treaty of Perpetual Friendship by just crossing the Satluj River. Give us a pretext to fight with the Sikhs. We will defeat the Sikhs and make you Wazir. Same Mir Jafar story. Conspiracy between Lal Singh, Teja Singh and the British will in turn create the prelude to the first Anglo-Sikh War, wherein what will happen is that the treachery of Lal Singh and Teja Singh will in turn lead to the Sikhs crossing deliberately the Satluj River, allowing the British to enter into this sector. And the British, though initially will face defeats, but very quickly they will defeat the Sikhs and sign the Treaty of Lahore. So again, I think you can now understand after close to 2.5 hours that there's a certain pattern here. The pattern is either treachery, is the concept of either infighting, or is war of succession. And this is where the Sikhs were also victims to the same politics. Now what is going to happen is, as soon as Treaty of Lahore will be signed, the demands which were made by the British were astonishing. 1 crore rupees in indemnity. Jalandhar Duab should be given to them. The British resident should be placed in Lahore. Lal Singh, what he wanted was now Wazir. Rani Jindal, Dilip Singh will stand. But the Sikhs had to pay this 1 crore very quickly, wherein the Jammu and Kashmir sector will be sold off to Gulab Singh, and this is where the Kohinoor was taken from India. Kohinoor was taken as a payment for the war indemnity which was pushed on Dilip Singh. That is where the British say, we got the Kohinoor as a transaction. They owed us money. We took Kohinoor, which is one of the dumbest thing which they can say actually. You rather took it as a way of conspiracy. Now you say that we got it because we wanted to pay war indemnity. But the idea is Kohinoor is lost here. Now, as soon as the Kohinoor is lost, Jammu and Kashmir is lost, 1 crore is asked, the Sikhs lose their mind. And what they will do is, after Treaty of Lahore, they will again fight. And now the British will again defeat them. And when they will defeat them, they will now sign another treaty, which is called Treaty of Bhairoval. Under the Treaty of Bhairoval, they will say, Rani Jindal, you are a problem. We are pensioning you off and sending you to Varanasi. They will say this Lal Singh in a way remained the Wazir for not even 1 year. And he sold off the Sikhs for that. Now what is going to happen is, they will say, we will create one British resident, 8 different, you can say, Sikh chiefs will help him rule. And therein, the British will now permanently place their army in the Lahore sector, in this whole sector itself. So basically, there are 2 treaties in the first Anglo-Sikh War, Lahore and Bhairawal. Lahore, rebellion, Bhairawal. Lahore, most of the things are already taken, Bhairawal, sealed. Now, the Sikhs will start to realize, mistake, problem, infighting, not good. So they will try to unite. When they will try to unite, it is called the Anglo-Sikh War, second Anglo-Sikh War, last war which we have to do. Rani Jindan is in Banaras. Dalhousie has now become the Governor General. He is not in the mood to now play with the Punjab sector too much. He wants to annex this territory. And this is where what he will do is, he will try to now look for an excuse. And that excuse will come in the form of Mulraj. Mulraj was the governor of Multan. He will be replaced by the British. He will then kill his replacement, kill others also, the other British elements also. And the Sikh chiefs will now rally behind Mulraj. British will say, this is what we were waiting for. And what is going to happen is, Mulraj rebellion in turn will lead to the Sikhs rising again. Dalhousie needed a pretext to conquer Punjab. Now he will defeat the Sikhs in multiple battles. And by 1849, he will make the Sikhs surrender. In that case, Dalhousie will be appreciated by the House of Lords, the Parliament itself, and the whole Sikh sector will be dissolved and taken into as a new, what we call as territory into British India. The threat of invasion, a buffer state with regards to Afghanistan, was also sorted. And this in turn completed the process of what we today call as the establishment of British Raj in India. So, with the Treaty of Lahore, Bhairawal and the Second Anglo-Sikh Wars, this is the end of this whole story. We started at Carnatic, ended in the Sikh sector. Did it make sense? Did it make sense? This whole concept? Now, something which you are waiting for, which is how to manage the chronology. Now, the trick is very simple. You already know the treaties, which is Aipopa, Uvasaba, Madman Seri, Allahabad, and La Lab, which is Lahore and Bhairawal. Now, how to remember the wars without remembering their years? Now, pay attention. There is an anomaly which allows for any form of, you can say, chronological question to be understood. C, 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 B, B, my, ma, my, 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 ma, ma, C, C. If you can remember this, sorted. First, second, third Carnatic are in sequence. Obviously, first, second and third Carnatic are in sequence. Then you have Plassey and then you have Buxar, 2 Bengal. The only anomaly is, first Mysore War happens, then the first Maratha War happens. Thereafter, Mysore, second, third, fourth, Maratha, second, third, Sikh, first and second. If you can remember this sequence, you can answer any question. If the only anomaly is Mysore and Maratha, the basic is C, B, my, ma, and Sikh. But you need to know that after the first Mysore War, it is not second Mysore War, it is first Maratha War. Now, if you actually apply this concept, you should be able to automatically answer any question, right? Try it. Comment in the chat box if you are able to use it. And on this note, I'll end this session. I hope that you found it useful. I hope that these one-shot videos are generally helping you. 2.5 hours to cover all major wars is that ways quite efficient. I did not want to unnecessarily extend the session itself. In this very small packet, you can answer any questions. If you found the session useful, which city is Madras, Mangalore, Seringapatam. If you found this session useful and helpful, do like it, share it with your friends, and also comment in the comment section if there is any form of sessions you want other than this, and also if you actually like this session itself. Thank you. I will see you soon with either the Second World War or something very useful under one shot. This is the third session under one shot for history. We've already covered social reform movement. We've already covered the First World War. Today I have completed all the battles of British India, which are relevant for the examination. For anybody who's preparing for 2025, 26, 27, this video is your one-stop solution. Just bookmark it and keep it with you. And thereafter, when we meet next time, I'll again try to cover something in this comprehensive manner. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye. Do like and share this video, and do subscribe to our channel. Use the code IAS English to get the 60% discount and the course at 22,999, and that code itself is very, very important. Thank you. Take care.